So the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Michaela, for the intro. Hi, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. I would like to give you a very short presentation about why Latin America, the fintech sector in Latin America has become kind of a hotspot, and why this really matters. Let's start with the venture capital available to Latin American fintechs and startups in general. What we can see here is that last year was an incredible year for Latin American startups and scale-ups in regards to funding available. Funding quadrupled in 2021 compared to previous years. And that kicked off a development that is nothing short of revolutionary for Latin America. Most of the funding, as you can see here, went into fintech, followed by e-commerce. So I want to try to show you the different ingredients kind of that kicked off this boom as sort of a recipe for the fintech boom in Latin America. So the first ingredient or aspect is that Latin America has an unusually large underbanked population. It is estimated that it's about 50% of the adult population either doesn't have a bank account or only limited access to financial services such as credit, mortgages, etc. So that is very much connected to the second ingredient, which is that legacy banks in Latin America and in most countries, you have very few dominant banks really covering the whole market that are pretty old-fashioned, and they are very profitable. That makes them expensive for their customers. As an example, like Brazilian banks are the most profitable in the world. That means that they are very expensive for their clients. They cater to a very small part of the population, and they are making enough money with doing that, and that's why they have no incentive whatsoever, basically, to be innovative. And that opens the door for outside disruption and innovation, and that's why fintech is such a big topic nowadays. Another part is the support of the public sector. I mean, you will hear later on more from Lisette, who is an expert in that field, in especially for Mexico. But I believe the public sector started to kind of support the emergence of fintech challenger or of challenger banks, not necessarily in a proactive way, but more in a passive way by not standing too much in the way of those challenger banks. And I think the best example is Nubank, who started in Brazil. And the Brazilian regulator allowed basically for this new bank to emerge and to go up against the legacy or incumbent banks. Later on, various countries, and Mexico was the first of all, started to create fintech laws. There are multiple countries in the region who are working on that and keep developing fintech regulation. But first, again, was more like that the regulators just allowed for new banks to emerge. Another really relevant ingredient here is the high connectivity in Latin America. As you all know, Latin America has a comparatively young population. It has a very high internet penetration, especially mobile. No other region in the world spends so much time on the internet as Latin Americans. I think it's on average it's about 10 hours a day almost that people, especially young people, spend online, and especially on their mobile phones. So they are very tech savvy, and they are very open to new solutions, to new services, apps, etc., the new technologies, and that also obviously is a big benefit for the emergence of fintech. Another part we have seen at the beginning is that all of a sudden sufficient funding was available. That funding, to a big part, comes from the outside. The United States, Asia, especially SoftBank was very dominant in that field, and then local VCs and investors, etc., followed. So this was a big bottleneck in previous years, and as we could see, especially last year, was a watershed moment where all of a sudden funding became more widely available for startups. And this also, as a consequence, led to the emergence of a real startup ecosystem, because those the first generation of fintech founders, they now own shares of unicorns. They made a lot of money, and they invest a big part of that money again in new startups. They share their experience, they share their networks, their know-how, and that they pass on basically the torch to a new generation of founders, and that creates this amazing dynamic in the region where this ecosystem starts to generate its own internal process of creating new solutions and startups. But most of these 6 ingredients have been around for quite a while. So why hasn't the fintech boom in Latin America not started way earlier? I believe it's because one key ingredient was missing, and that one ingredient was born as a consequence of the COVID pandemic. No other region in the world suffered so much from the pandemic as Latin America in regards to the number of deaths, but also to the length of the lockdown, which was really strict in most countries. And what that triggered was the needs, or basically it didn't give people another choice than to start purchasing and paying online. Something that a big part of the population in the past was either couldn't do because they wouldn't have access to credit cards and online payments, but also because there was always a big kind of mistrust or a bit of resistance to online payments because of the fear of credit card fraud, etc. But then came the pandemic, and it didn't leave people another choice, and that led to a fundamental shift in consumer behavior from offline to online, and that kicked off this amazing revolution and opened basically the floodgates for new digital solutions, especially in banking and fintech, to start really creating traction. Why does this all matter? I mean, it's nice for those founders who have now become unicorns. It's nice for the average consumer in well-off situations in the middle and upper class in Latin America. But in the end, the impact of fintech in Latin America goes much deeper than that. And I would like to share, to end my presentation, 2 short anecdotes. The first is I recently spoke to a friend who owns his own fintech in Colombia, in the micro lending space, and he told me the story of a person who was in a personal emergency and needed to borrow money. We're talking about a small amount, and because this person was unbanked and couldn't get, or underbanked and couldn't get a credit from the bank in the short run, she had to resort to a moneylender or a loan shark. In Colombia, they call them gota a gota. And those individuals or small companies, they charge up to 50% interest rate per month. And the problem is, if you cannot pay back your loan, including interest, on time, some of those loan sharks, they resort to violence, they resort to kidnapping, or even worse. So basically, for many people in the region, fintech solutions, getting access to credit that makes it safer to borrow, is not just kind of a little increase in their quality of life, but it's really about a life or death question. That just shows how fundamental the social impact of fintech solutions in Latin America can be. And I believe there's so many founders of the first generation in Latin American fintech. That's exactly what they want. They want to create a social impact. They want to change the world for millions of people, not just for the privileged few. And that's why fintech has such an amazing power to change how things work in the region. The second part is more from the corporate world. As I was introduced as an entrepreneur, being active in Latin America for over a decade, one of the services we offer to foreign clients is to start to form their legal entity in the region, and that includes opening a bank account and ideally getting them a credit card so they can start purchasing whatever they need locally. And getting a credit card locally has been nothing short of excuse my French, a pain in the butt, because like the local incumbent banks, they always want to go the safe way. They want to see a track record, a credit history of multiple months, which means that for the first few months, it's not even possible to get a credit card once you establish a subsidiary, no matter what size of company stands behind this local subsidiary. But for a few years now, we have seen new challenger models come in, Chiefs, Clara, etc. There are many of them. And thanks to those innovative new fintechs, it's all of a sudden it has become possible to get a credit card within a few days or weeks instead of months. Instead of bad customer service, you get a really fluid online onboarding process. Then you have access to an online portal where you can create your own digital credit cards within seconds for your company, for your employees, etc. So for us as a company providing such a service, it's been a game changer, really. And I know that this is the case for many small and medium-sized companies across Latin America. So to end, I believe fintech has a social potential in Latin America that is almost unlimited. I think we are standing at the beginning of a trend that will last for many years to come. And it's exciting times to be part of that journey. And I invite all of you to share that journey. If you have any questions to me personally, please feel free to reach out. I'd be happy to enter a conversation with you, and I look forward to the rest of this webinar. Thank you.
Amazing. Thank you very much, Daniel, for your very interesting and informative presentation. And I'm really looking forward to our discussion. And now, please, let me introduce our second keynote speaker, who is Lisette Den. Lisette is a partner in Instruct Public Affairs and Law Consulting, where she is in charge of the legal area specialized on financial and corporate law, with a focus on digital financial services. Previously, she held several positions in the Ministry of Finance, where she led the drafting and design of the fintech law in Mexico. She also acted as legal counsel at the Public Credit Unit and as a chief of staff to the Undersecretary for Revenues. Lisette is a Mexican lawyer with an LLM degree in international finance law from King's College London, University of London. So, dear Lisette, the microphone is yours. And when you finish your keynote speech, I will introduce the other panelists to our audience. So, I will give you the presenter rights, and you will be able to share your screen. One moment. Okay. Lisette, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the invitation. I'm very honored to be here and to share this panel with all these great people. So I am beginning to share my screen. So I will talk very briefly about what has happened in Mexico and what we are seeing in Mexico actually right now. So Mexico in March 2018 published a fintech law. What does that law do for Mexico? Well, that law, to begin with, was based on main principles and aimed to be flexible and adaptable to change. What does that mean? That in that time, 2018, the regulator wanted to issue a law that could be that could change according to progress, to tech progress. So tried to give a general framework in the law and then leave to secondary regulation any specifics of our requirements, additional requirements in order to operate a financial entity. This might not be that true, or might not seem like that for many fintechs, but that was the purpose when the law was issued. What was regulated in the law? Well, two financial entities were recognized and regulated, and those were the e-money institutions and the crowdfunding institutions, which obviously were activities that already existed in the Mexican market, but did not have a specific legal framework to comply with and to operate around it. And as well, fintech law also regulates and establishes the framework and the rules for open finance. And why I say open finance and not open banking, this is because different from other countries, in Mexico, fintech law mandates that all types of financial institutions have to have standardized APIs to share open, aggregated, and transactional data between them. This has actually not been fully regulated in Mexico because, as I said, fintech law only established a general framework, and especially for open finance, the specific rules have to be established in the secondary regulation, and right now we only have regulation regarding the open data regarding ATMs, but we're expecting soon the other set of secondary regulation. And the other two issues or matters, themes that were regulated in or mentioned in the fintech law were cryptocurrencies, which were defined in the law, and also some restrictions were included as to what can be done with cryptocurrencies in Mexico. And the regulatory sandbox was also established there, which obviously gives, and based on the main example we took to draft the law was what was happening in the UK. So taking that as an example, regulatory sandbox gives a safe space for those innovation companies that want to prove their business model, but are not sure that it will be successful, or that need some exceptions to the compliance of certain secondary rules in order to try their business models, their business, and then see if they wanted to graduate into a specific financial entity. So all of these is mentioned in our fintech law. Obviously, well, of course, we are living its 4th anniversary. As I said, this was enacted on 2018, and still we are seeing that there are many secondary regulations still pending. As for example, I already mentioned what has happened with open finance, but I will talk later on how many fintech companies we've seen. For example, according to Finovista, in 2021, there are 512 active fintech startups in Mexico, which means that this is 16% up from the previous year. The progress we've seen from 2019 to 2021, as you can see in the left side of the graphic, is that on 2019 we had 394. And now we have 512 startups, active fintech startups in Mexico. As to which sectors they represent, obviously, fintech law only mentions those 5 topics we just mentioned before, but obviously we understand that fintech is a larger ecosystem, right? And as to that ecosystem, we obviously know that, for example, the main sector represented in Mexico right now, with the highest number of startups, is lending, that represent 21% of those active fintech startups right now. followed very closely by the payments and remittances sector that represent 18% of those startups. What happens? You can ask me why lending is not part of the fintech law. Well, because obviously the ecosystem represents many sectors, many different sectors, many other financial activities that are or services that are provided through technology. Many of those services and activities did not have to be acknowledged or regulated in a new law, because either they were already regulated before in Mexico, or they do not need a specific regulation. For example, as the third sector, largest sector in Mexico is the tech companies that represent 14%, and tech companies as in software as a service, right? And the software as a service do not need a specific regulatory framework. As to VC interest, Mexico is not left behind. We've seen a lot of interest, and we've seen that the main tickets, around 61% of the tickets, have been of up to $500,000, but we've obviously seen investment of up to $50 million. Some of the leaders, some of the names that you should not forget. We do have unicorns in Mexico. Some of them are not fintech, but from the fintech sector. Names that you have to keep in mind is Confio, Bitso, Clip, or Clara, which have been main actors in this sector. From 2018 up to date, the requests filed for authorization as fintech companies, and now I'm referring only to the e-money institutions and crowdfunding institutions recognized in the fintech law. There were around 90 requests filed, from which 58 were e-money institutions and 32 crowdfundings. Right now, there have been issued 52 final authorizations. So we already have 52 fintech entities fully authorized in Mexico. And actually today, 3 more were published. So this number should have been updated 2 hours ago to 55. And there are still 35 pending authorizations to be issued by the financial authorities. And when fintech law was published, obviously there were many fintechs already operating, so those were recognized as fintechs. I mean, they were granted what we call the grandfathering clause, allowing them to keep operating. And from those 90 requests filed, 70 were operating under that grandfathering clause. So fintech ecosystem kept its pace independently of the regulation. And now I will leave the floor, because I am looking forward to the discussion and hearing the other panelists. Thank you very much.
Amazing. Thank you very much, Lizette. And now I would like to introduce our next panelist. So first of all, I'd like to introduce Juan Pablo Bruso. Juan Pablo has more than 20 years internet experience in the finance field, in which he has been able to innovate and lead different initiatives regarding fintech. He is the founder and former president of Argentina Fintech Chamber, CEO and founder of Money, and CEO and founder of Dinero Mail. So it was sold to Naspers, and CMO of Dermate, sold to Melly. Moreover, he is an active investor in internet ventures. Juan Pablo is an industrial engineer with an MBA. Juan Pablo, would you like to add something and welcome our audience?
Just thank you very much for the invitation. I would like to keep discussing with you the other topics.
Okay, amazing. Thank you very much, Juan Pablo. Okay, And last but not least, I would like to introduce Monica Mijares. Monica is a fintech entrepreneur passionate about delivering solutions that help people manage their money better, because sadly, most of us are in a vulnerable financial position. She moved to Malaysia as part of a big PACE founding team to help build and launch what is now one of the fastest growing challenger neobanks in Southeast Asia. Prior to Big Bang, Monica was one of the first joiners in UK challenger bank, Tandem, where she helped build a digital bank from scratch. She's a product and customer experience senior business leader with over 17 years experience working in highly pressured, fast-changing environments. Monica is a mindset coach and the host of Mind of Success, a personal development and entrepreneurship podcast for the ambitious and spiritual women. She has a background in engineering and holds a master's degree in information system management from the London School of Economics. Monica, welcome. Would you like to add something?
Hello, thank you everyone. Thank you, Michaela. Well, it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for the invite and really looking forward to having the conversation with everyone.
Okay, amazing. Thank you very much and welcome. So, and after this amazing brief introduction of our panelists, I would like to start the panel discussion. So, today, first question for all of you. How has the pandemic influenced the fintech space in Latin America? Who would like to start and share their thoughts?
Maybe I can start. Yes, the pandemic for Latin America was kind of an accelerator. Of course, when the pandemic started in Latin America, all the stores were closed, so people need to change the behavior. They were forced to change the behavior. So people in Latin America, for example, it's very common to pay bills or top up phone, going to specific locations and paying cash. So people needed to find another way to solve their problems. And many of the fintechs in Latin America were already trying to solve those problems. And this was very good news for the entire ecosystem, because it was like the first trial. People were forced to find a different way. And again, for the banking system, it is the same. So we was like a first touch, first initial relationship with many consumers with fintechs. So depending on the vertical, we saw a huge growth on adoption of new services. In the case of let's say wallets or similar, they grew really fast during the pandemic, because they were solving those problems that I mentioned before. Regarding consumer credit, probably this, as it happens in all the rest of the world, it didn't grow because the people were at home. They were not spending more money. But again, it was a big accelerator, and I believe that most of the companies take advantage of this situation.
Thank you very much, Juan Pablo. Daniel, is that Monica? Would you like to add something? Maybe to share your experience.
Well, I don't live in Latin America, but what I can tell you is that the trend was very similar in Asia. It was an accelerator, especially like many of the fintechs, and probably this is like global, like the core market is the young millennial digital savvy kind of like middle upper class. But then what COVID did was it forced everybody else to jump into the train of I have to go digital. That's it. So now instead of just focusing on this layer of digital savvy, then everybody else it's kind of starting to jump into the wagon. So I think that's a universal trend, I would think.
Amazing. Lizette, would you like to add something? Maybe you can share with us, let's say, the legal changes, or let's say the legal framework. If something has changed, during COVID.
Well, actually, here, as there are certain regulated activities, obviously there were processes, like for example, what I mentioned of the files that had already been pending authorization. Well, they took longer given the pandemic because obviously the public offices were closed. However, anyway, services and all other businesses and models and other types of products that could be offered in the market had a boom. Obviously, it grew very quickly and pushed some of the pushed traditional sector and the minds of some traditional conservative regulators to understand that the urgent need to recognize in the regulation different ways or the digital way of providing financial services, and to enable and to be more flexible and to understand that some of the risks that before were controlled maybe by physical processes, now those risks can be even better controlled by tech processes or different different digital solutions. So this I think was good for the market, and obviously led to growth, and will keep that way.
I believe, to also try to answer your question, Michaela, why, like, what the impact of the pandemic was. I think a huge impact on the bankerization of people was because of the pandemic, was because multiple governments across the region, they started to hand out subsidies during the pandemic. And in order to do that, they facilitated the creation of digital accounts for people receiving those subsidies. So all of a sudden, we have maybe approximately 40 million people who didn't have a bank account before, who now have one. Now the question is, do they use those tools given to them? Or once the subsidy stopped, did they stop using those bank accounts? But basically, at least the fundamental infrastructure was pushed a lot, and that is a big chance, as Lisa also said, to push more digital services into that channel, and therefore increase social inclusion.
Amazing. Thank you very much, Daniel. And now, let's say we talked about not the past, but about the pandemic. Now I would like to focus, let's say, on the near future. So what do you think? Where do you expect the fintech space in Latin America to be in the near future? So we spoke about the development. What will happen? Juan Pablo, would you like to continue? Where do you expect, let's say, the future of fintech?
Okay, perfect. I believe that in the future, the word itself, fintech, is going to disappear. For me, fintech is a definition that is for those years, because all the companies will have the tech side. And what we saw in these couple of years in all Latin America, but I can talk with more properly for Argentina, it is that the fintechs add a lot of value directly to the consumers, but also they push a lot to the traditional financial system. In these last years, what we saw in Argentina, it is that bankings are starting to try to give better service to their customers. And as Daniel described at the very beginning, it's not only better service, but it's also targeting not only the people with better earnings of the population, but also people that at today the traditional banking system still reluctant to have as a customer. So I believe that the combination between fintechs and the traditional financial system will generate a big impact for consumers. And obviously, the part of the consumers, the bottom and of the pyramid, the people that today are totally underserved, I believe that those people, the relationship start to change very fast. And with technology, the change can be much faster than traditional changes. So I believe that in the near future, we will see that most of the payments will be made without using cash. Today, 90% of the people is using cash for day-to-day payments. I'm sure that most of the people will have access to credit, as Daniel said at the very beginning. The access to credit for some part of the population it is really restricted, and I believe that the fintechs change that. And again, the traditional financial system, it is also changing the original focus. But finally, I believe that we are going to stop talking about fintech and banks, and finally it will be the financial system with different actors, with different players, with different backgrounds, and finally doing something similar. It is better solution for customers, focusing on customers that are totally underserved, and giving them the possibility not to withdraw the money once they receive their salary or the subsidize or the pension, but use this money in a digital way, in a more efficient way. So I am sure that this is going to happen in the next couple of years, really, really fast, and hope that for Latin America with a big impact on all sense.
To build on that, my thinking is, if I focus specific on fintech as such, fintech as we know it, I agree that it will be like in the future, just everybody is just doing financial services. But my hypothesis or observation is that fintech as we know it today, it started, let's say, in the UK, Europe, US, and then Asia followed rapidly. And what I'm seeing, it's like now what's coming after Asia, it's Latin America, it's going super fast, and it will be followed by Africa. So if I take that into account, basically what we're seeing now is the rise of a new customer segment that it's like the gig economy. It's not the business banking as such, but the SMEs and the gig economy workers. So, and Latin America and Asia are very similar in that sense, as in the population, it's the composition of the population is very similar. So they both suffered when it was a pandemic. It's the person that used to sell in the streets, the person that used to drive, like they were heavily affected. And that's a very underserved market that we're seeing that it's starting to be tackled in Asia. So what I'm seeing, it's like same population exists in Latin America. So it's a huge opportunity for whomever gets there now and starts disrupting today rather than in 2 or 3 years from now.
And just to I mean, I agree completely with Juan Pablo and Monica. And only to make a double click into Mexico, I hope that I mean we've seen an increase in fintech in Mexico, but obviously we're still far behind on digitalization and and reducing the use of cash. So hopefully this will, and along with financial inclusion public policy, which the government is fostering, hopefully the reduction on cash and digital products and services will grow faster, and this has to come also with the decrease on the informal sector that we see in Mexico and Latin America, which is very high. So this informal sector is the one that has to be it has to be the focus of these new entities and make them be part of the ecosystem.
Amazing. Thank you very much. I'm sorry, I just lost our window. So, yeah, I will have a question for Daniel. Daniel, in your biography, you were presented as the promoter of Latin America's potential abroad, especially in Europe. Why do you think European investors should pay attention to Latin America, specifically fintech?
Interest and maybe also knowledge on the part of European investors when it comes to Latin American fintech. I believe there are a lot of great investment opportunities. Again, it has to do with the role of fintech in emerging economies such as Latin America, because these, like, while in developed countries, fintech might improve an existing service by a few percent. In Latin America and other regions, other developing markets, fintech like improves the lives of 99% of the population. So that just shows that the base of consumers and the problems that are being solved are still pretty fundamental. And on that, there will be new services building on top of that, and that just shows the long-term potential of fintech in Latin America. And I believe European investors and maybe companies active in the fintech space should pay more attention to those markets, especially Mexico, but also Brazil, also Colombia, Chile, Argentina, etc. There's a lot of interesting potential in the region, and that's something I am always trying to do, to mention it more. I know from experience promoting Latin America, not only fintech but in general, especially in Europe, for over 10 years, that it's still that the region still suffers from a pretty bad image, and unjustifiably so. That hopefully will change, and hopefully that will include European investors getting more involved in the Latin American fintech space. If you look at SoftBank, if you look at all the VCs out of Silicon Valley, etc., that are extremely committed to the region, European involvement is way below par, and hopefully that will change. Maybe this webinar will make a little difference. Let's hope so.
Hopefully. Juan Pablo, what about you? You as president of a fintech chamber, what will you, let's say to the potential investors? Why they should invest in Latin America?
I believe that Latin America. I believe that investment should be for Latin America and not for a specific country. I believe there's a ton of opportunities, and opportunities with a huge impact in the society. As we describe it already many times, there's a part of the population, and a very important part of the population that is totally underserved. And it is the people that we see, as we describe it, selling the street, people that work for on industries. So, but most of the people really are underserved in Latin America. So it's a big opportunity to build companies that can solve this problem. We have already. I'm happy to see that in the last 2 years, at least, the investments are growing exponentially in Latin America. This is a very good sign up, and I hope that we keep in this path. But I would love to hear from more funds from Europe. Most of the funds, as we said, are from the US. Investing in Latin America, investing in not only building big companies, but also in solving problems that are very important for the region.
Thank you very much. And I would like to use Monica and your experience in Asia. So what do you think? Which fintech trends could be adopted in Latin America?
I would say there's two specific ones. One is consumer driven, the other one is capability driven. So from a consumer perspective, so we have China, we have Alipay, and we have QR code. Basically, that's everywhere. What we're seeing, for example, in Mexico, we had CODI, and my understanding is it wasn't extremely successful. But what I'm seeing in Southeast Asia is that QR payments is following the trend from China. And then I was speaking with someone, like a Mexican fintech person yesterday as well. He was like, no, it couldn't work in Mexico. But actually, in Southeast Asia, it's also working really well because instead of having different wallets, having different QR systems each, there's what's called interoperable system. And it's just like very easy. It's just a matter, it's a cultural thing as well. It's like properly the enterprise building like these QR really needs to work well with the fintechs and the banks and make it as simple as possible for the customer to use it. It's like it's been a success here, and probably in Latin America it will be implemented well. So that's like from a customer perspective. From a capabilities perspective, what Singapore is doing, it's really cool. So basically, let's say, for example, Lisette, that she's more into the legal regulatory bit. Whenever you download the app and you have to go through KYC and take the picture of your ID and then the video selfie, and then the regulators give you all these requirements. Basically, created a central database where they have that, and then the fintech just connects to the government API. The customer just does approve, tick the box, yes, I enter my password, done. So you really reduce the eKYC process to 2 clicks. And that if any country, not just Latin America, but any country in the world manages to do that again, it really simplifies the journey. It simplifies the headaches from the fintechs. It consolidates, it helps bring the unbanked into the banking system. So I think capabilities-wise, that could be a big one to look into.
Amazing. Thank you very much, Monica, for sharing with us your experience. And Lisette, I would like to ask you, so do you think that nowadays regulations are helping the development? Let's say now Latin America's regulations are helping the development of our fintech, or it's creating an entry barrier for new players?
Well, I have mixed feelings because partly regulation gives certainty, right? And that certainty, for example, is useful for all VCs and private investors and investment in general to come and invest in Mexico. They know where they are playing. They know what to expect, right? So this is good. On the other hand, regulation is, I mean, we have a very formal system, no? And regulators can only act according to what is written in the law and the rules. So what has happened is that they have been struggling, how I see it, they have been struggling as to how to regulate a very dynamic and changing ecosystem and not hinder and not prevent its growth in doing that. Many fintechs have said that it is over-regulated, and that has been something that has not permitted the either. I mean, we have seen a lot of startups fail because they cannot bear the burden, the regulatory burden, or some of them just only choose not to come to Mexico and maybe operate from another jurisdiction, and to avoid having, as well, we have very long authorization process. Originally, the process shouldn't take more than 7 months, but we haven't seen that to be true at all. So you have to hire a lot of consultants to prepare the filing and pay fees, and then wait time to begin operation. And so I think those are the two faces of the coin. No, I think it is good, but we have still to find the correct balance in order to allow the more flexible and smooth growth of the ecosystem and more rapid growth, and not hinder its. I mean, and not push away some of these great ideas and some of these great business models that have decided not to come to Mexico, or that they just could not do it and not comply with the rules.
Thank you very much, Lisa. Daniel, what do you experience in Europe? Now, let's describe, let's say, the whole regulatory and situation, legal situation. Do you think for European companies, what is, let's say, their opinion about it? Is it for them a barrier, or what do you recommend them?
I'm not an expert on European fintech regulation, to be honest. But I believe what Lisa just said is true anywhere in the world. Like the regulator, and I think Latin America has a tendency to always overregulate once public entities catch up with what's going on, which can take a while, but then it's being overregulated. And that can really be a hindrance to the further development of an industry. I don't think Europe is very different in this regard, maybe a bit less regulated, but I really hope that regulation, especially in Latin America, will not kill what is happening in the regional fintech space.
Thank you very much, Daniel. Juan Pablo, and now we spoke already about Malaysia, Southeast Asia, Europe very briefly, and I'd like to ask you if you can describe Argentina's fine fintech landscape.
Sorry, I was mute. Fintech ecosystem in Argentina, is following the same trend that all in Latin America. Essentially, it is booming. When we start in 2017, the Fintech Chamber, we were only 14 companies, 14. Today, we have more than 200 Fintech company developing different businesses. Of course, many of those companies are on the early stage. So they are trying new business models. They are just entering. They are just essentially startups. But we have like a dozen of companies well-funded with a good track record. I believe that the interest in fintech in Argentina is essentially based on the market opportunity that we already discussed some topics, and also the available infrastructure in the case of Argentina. Regarding the market opportunity, regarding the market opportunity, as Daniel says at the very beginning, we have a huge underbanked population. And let me give you a really interesting story at the very beginning of our company that will describe what a underbanked population is. We made a survey at the very beginning of the company. Essentially, we wanted to understand which was the relationship of our users with the bank system. All our users need to have a bank account. And when we ask them to the customers, which is your bank account, 30% of them answer, sorry, I don't have a bank account. So when we keep diving in this question, essentially what happened, the people will say, I don't have a bank account, I have a debit card. The only relationship with the financial system was a debit card. So once they receive their salary, their pension, they're subsidized, they go to an ATM and they withdraw all the money. This underbanked population is like forced to live a cash economy, and this where we have a great opportunity. Then we talked about some numbers. 90% of the cash of the payments made by consumers are cash. 30%. We only have 30% of people having a credit card, so they have a bank account but they don't have credit. So first, the opportunity, the market opportunity is really, really interesting in Latin America, and essentially in Argentina, sorry. And in the case of the infrastructure, in Argentina, we start with the previous government making some regulations that were very important for fintech, for the infrastructure. From many years ago, we have online transfers. That for me is something very essential for making good fintech businesses. We have the onboarding for a digital bank or for a digital wallet is allowed to be 100% online from a long time ago also. We have also, if you are registered at the central bank, you have the availability as a payment provider to have something very similar to a bank account. You can use the same system to transfer and to receive money. You have what we recently mentioned, interoperable QR code. From just a couple of weeks ago, we started with this QR interoperable code. So the infrastructure was there. So that's why I believe that in Argentina, we have a lot of fintech companies adding a lot of value to the financial system. And I believe that we will keep that way in the next couple of years.
Amazing. Thank you very much. Now, question for all of you. How can fintechs win and monetize their offerings while keeping the customer in mind? Who would like to start? Monica?
Yes, that's a really good question. So I think when fintech started years ago, the game was let's acquire customers, build a customer base, and then we'll monetize. That has changed. That was like 7 years ago. Now, fintechs to be successful, like in the long term to survive, they need to take into account what's the monetization strategy since the beginning of the company, like part of the business case. That model is obsolete by now. And the how to do it. Of course, you have to create products that have the unit economics that allow you to build that. But just because you build a product on its own, that's not going to basically create a successful company. I think the secret is it's easy quote unquote, to build the infrastructure. It's easy to build another product, another feature, and build the ecosystem because it's just technology. What is the real challenge that will move the needle is how do you engage your customers such that they start using all of your ecosystem. And the how to do it, that's still like a big unknown that each of the own fintechs need to answer by knowing their customers. But the secret is not only in building a product that has a unit economics, but how do you engage the customer since the beginning, and not focusing on just on build one feature, the other, but like build both feature and engagement in parallel.
Thank you very much, Monica. Would you like to add something, Daniel, Juan, Pablo, Lizette?
Essentially, I agree with Monica. I believe that you have two different companies, fintech companies, the one with a very good funding that, of course, they are essentially focused at the very beginning of growing the user base and adding functionalities. And they are starting to at least make the question and how we are going to monetize all this user base. And of course, it depends a lot of the vertical of the company. You have some verticals that it is easier to monetize, like insurance, like credit, and you have other verticals more focused on the transactional, that the fees that the company can earn are very little, so you need a lot of volume. So I believe that at least right now there's a understanding that okay, the user base is not enough, and it's not enough not only because you will need to find a way to monetize it, but what we are seeing it is that sometimes the users also change very fast from one application to other application, and when you have a battle of okay, rebates or discounts, is people like they don't care about the application. the companies are not generating engaging. They are generating transactions related with promotions. And this is something that all the companies have to work. And it can be summarized as, I know it's only a matter of who has more money. But I believe that in the past, we have many companies that were not so good fun. They found a way to really have a relationship with the customers. And I believe that is the difference. Okay, how are we going to build something that will generate a long-term relationship with our customers, and not necessarily a new feature, and with new promotions in order to start generating traction. This is part of the challenges that we all have as all the companies, and it's interesting to understand how it going to evolve in the next in the future. But again, sorry, from an entrepreneur perspective, we need to find a way to generate this relationship with the customer, and it is not only paying the customer to interact with our platform, for sure.
Maybe adding to Juan Pablo, a few days ago, the new numbers from LAFCA came out in regards to venture capital available in Q1 of this year. You remember maybe the first slide I showed in my presentation that showed the quadrupling of venture funding available in 2021. This trend has slowed down a lot in Q1, and given the recent developments in global capital markets, it is pretty certain that even less venture capital might be available over the months to come for venture firms or startups. So I think what that will cause is a consolidation in the market. Juan Pablo said it. I mean, before it was just who has the most funding and can acquire the most clients without making any money. I think those times for now are over. Those companies who will survive are those who already have these relationships that Juan Pablo mentions and connect and have actually found a way to monetize on those. And I believe that will probably be hard for many startups in the fintech space and others, but at the same time, it will also be a healthy kind of purging of the market, and those who will survive have found a way and can keep growing, and then maybe something new can come of it.
And just very quickly to add to all of the previous answers, they have to gain the trust of the customers. Trust, I think, is in the center. We have to change the mindset of all the users and understand that these are safe solutions, right? To begin with, that they are the same as if they go to the bank branch and transact there. Gaining trust and with transparency and customer-centric policies and I mean everything that fintechs provide. I think that these can be models that could very well be monetized and would never be as onerous as what banking fees are right now, or at least in Mexico.
Thank you very much, all of you. And maybe the last question, what advice would you give to those that are trying to innovate with fintech? So, Daniel, would you like to start?
I think Monica and Juan Pablo would be much better positioned to answer those questions because they are involved in fintech startups. Yeah, in general, if you try to build something that ties into very much with what Lisa just said, you have to put the customer at the center. You have to create trust in order to be able to monetize your product at some point, sooner or later.
Thank you, Daniel. Monica?
Yes, like 100% agree. It's like, I think that's the core, not just the fintech, like any innovation. You need to think of the customer and what's the problem that they are trying to solve, not what's the fintech that you are trying to build. It's like focus on the customer first and then build the product around them, build the experience around them. But I think focusing on the product, well, focusing on the customer is not enough. You also need to take into account that building a fintech is hard, that you will run out of money, that you will face all the regulatory blockers. So you also need to think about, hey, with these limited resources, that it's like my people and tech resources and money, and with all these constraints, how can I solve that problem in a better way? And basically, speed is the best ally that you have. Properly use the don't wait until everything is 100% ready. Use the MVP approach so that then you learn fast. Build with your it's like build with your customers. Not only know them, but build with them, and then iterate fast.
Yeah. Thank you, Monica. Juan Pablo. Oh, Lizette. Sorry.
Oh, okay. I would say that there is still a lot of population in Mexico that is not being attended. So we've seen a lot of success of many fintech companies, but maybe they're still focusing on the same sector. And as I mentioned previously, this informal sector that obviously it is harder to reach, right? And harder to educate, but it is there. No, I can say that it might be half of the population in Mexico that needs to be integrated to the system. And this population can be attacked and can be and services and products can be provided to them, offered to them. And I think that this has to be something that needs to be done and can be done. So I would say there is a lot of space still to be focused on in Mexico. So plenty of things to do.
Thank you, Lizette. Juan Pablo, would you like to share with us yourself? Hope he didn't lost Juan Pablo. 1 second. I will just promote him. Let's see. We lost him. Juan Pablo, can we hear you now? If you will change the mode, just click on the microphone. And then we will be able to hear you. The second button from the left side to change the listening mode to the microphone. Okay, but yes, thank you all. I hope Juan Pablo will be able to join us for the, let's say, last round, the summary round. So it was really amazing having you here, Daniel, Lizette, Monica, and Juan Pablo. And now, because we have only 9 minutes left, can you please share with our audience some recommendation or a quick summary regarding fintech? What will you recommend them? Daniel, you're the first one on my screen. Would you like to start? Share the final recommendation.
Europeans, as this is organized by European organization, I think, and I'm European myself, we have to understand that fintech in Latin America is something very different from fintech in Europe. It's about social inclusion. It's about catering to the underserved, the underbanked or the unbanked. There's still a lot to be done. Lisa just said it. There's still a huge part of the population that has never had any touch point probably with any kind of fintech solution. So it's really about understanding that the reality in Latin America and trying to find solutions that make sense for this type of potential consumer. And this needs simple solutions, very accessible solutions, very easy solutions, and then you can really, also as an investor, be part of something really life-changing for many people.
Thank you very much, Daniel. Now I can see Juan Pablo. Juan Pablo, you are still in the listening mode, so please, you have to click on the second button from the left side to change it, otherwise you will be not able to hear you, the microphone button. just select this, and we should be able to hear you, Asmat. Otherwise, can you please assist Juan Pablo? And I would like to continue with Lizette because I can see my colleague Jörg is already here. Lizette.
Sure. Well, Mexico might have, or in general, Latin America might have different social and political problems, but what they do have as well is a very large entrepreneur ecosystem, and they have thriving and great ideas that I think they will make the change in the near future. These entrepreneurs need a lot of support, both from obviously council, but from VCs and from funds investment. They need money. They need a lot of counsel as to what can be done without a license, and what needs a license. And that's another thing I want to tell you. Don't think that everything is overregulated or everything is regulated. Actually, it is not. There are plenty of things that can be done within a normal or a very fair framework, and I think that these new business models will be very good. I mean, they will be the focus and center of the focus in the next years, and hopefully we will see it still growing in the future.
Amazing. Thank you very much. Monica.
Yeah, so for me, the one thing to take away from this panel, and I think we all agree, is that fintech is about impact. As such, I think it's super important that you are super passionate about your mission, and then create a culture within the company that is passionate about what you're doing, passionate about the customer. And once you have like those elements aligned, then basically lead everyone into building a product and a company and a fintech that is solving basically that mission, that problem statement. And it's super important that you nurture your talent, because probably similar to when I moved to Asia, like given that fintech is kind of new within the region, you don't have all the fintech experts. So go and hire really good leaders, hire one or two experts, fintech experts as such, but then focus on building the culture and nurturing the talent, upskilling, teach them the skills. And then if you focus on those three things, then I think you're up for success.
Thank you very much, Monica. Unfortunately, I can see that Juan Pablo is still in the listening mode, but I'm sure we'll try to find a solution. Otherwise, he will share his final recommendation in the chat function. And before we go, I would like to hand over the microphone to my colleague, Jörg Thuchen, who has a little present for you. He's the chairman of the Climate Action Commission. Jörg, welcome.
Michaela, thank you very much. Can you hear me?
We can hear you, but not see you.
Yeah, that is the bad message I have in the beginning. I cannot make myself visible, but I'm very happy that you at least can hear me. So I start without that you can see me, but obviously I also can share my screen, which is even more important that you can see my screen than myself. Having said that, thank you very, very much, dear panelists, dear speakers, for being here, for sharing your insights, for engaging into such a lively discussion. And I have the pleasure to hand over a tree certificate to each of you. Handing over tree certificates, that's what in many cases myself do for the more than 200 webinars per year EUTech is doing. And this is always a very special pleasure to me. Why is that? Michaela mentioned briefly, I am the chair of the Climate Action Commission. And in my real life, so to say, I am the managing director of GoBro Now. We are a climate consulting company. And obviously, in both roles, my life is very closely related to climate, and trees have a lot to do with climate. So having this little gift for you is really a big pleasure. Thank you very much for being here. And now I quickly show you the certificates which I'm going to send over to you after the webinar. So this is the tree certificate for Daniel Breitenmoser. Here is the certificate for Juan Pablo Bruso. This is the certificate for Monica Millares. And last but not least, the certificate for Lisette Nehm. I hope, as always, that I have been somewhat close in pronouncing your names correctly. And having said that, I hand back to Michaela, who certainly has some very final last words. Before I do that, whoever is interested in learning more about our tree planting program in Africa, or the kind of consulting services we do at Global Now to support companies being in order to transform them to a 1.5 degree compatible future, reach out to me, ask any questions you like. I'm more than happy to engage into any kind of discussion with you. And thank you very much again, Michaela.
Thank you very much, Jörg. And thank you very much for hand over our gift. And it was really amazing having you here, Daniel, Lisette, Monica, Juan Pablo, and for this really amazing and very informative discussion. So thank you, our audience, as well, for joining us today. And please join us on the LinkedIn, our Latin America the LinkedIn group, or our UTech LinkedIn group, where you can follow all of our events or all of our activities. And we hope to see you soon again during our next event. And remember, the technology obliges. I wish you a wonderful day, and thank you again. Have a nice day. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
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 Bye bye. Bye bye.
Bye.
Bye.